Welcome to the Ladies Musical Club's virtual 130th anniversary toast. We are gathered exactly 130 years to the day and time from the LMC's first public concert, given March 20th, 1891 at 2:30 in the home of Mrs. Ellen Bartlett Bacon, the LMC's first president. I'm Whitney Henderson, the LMC's archivist, and I'm joined here with the LMC's board and committee chairs who will introduce themselves.
I am Roberta Diesner and grateful for my 60 plus years of membership in this amazing organization of women dedicated to music and to sharing of it. I was honored to be a president of LMC and now delight in working with our Music in Schools outreach.
Hi, my name is Kate Kelly and I'm currently the vice president of the club and also membership secretary. And I'm delighted to have been with the club for almost 3 years now.
Hi, my name is Lynn Muhleisen. I'm a proud 25-year member, past president, and current chair of the Francis Walton competition.
Hi, I'm Kate Smith. I'm the current president of Ladies Musical Club and very proud of our historical part in Seattle's musical life. And so my dress is a bit of a tribute to 1891. I am also the longtime chair for about 27 years of the Music in Schools Committee, co-chair, that is.
Hi, I'm Regina Thomas. I'm a member about 20 years, a past LMC president, and I'm currently the chair of Public Concerts Program.
Hi, I'm Nicole Truesdell. I'm a board member, and I'm also chair of the piano group and our composers group. I've been in the club for about 10 years.
Hi, I'm Vicki White Miltoon. I am 2 months shy of being a 50-year member. I'm a violinist, and I'm proud to be the recording secretary for the board.
Our story starts today not at the LMC's founding in March of 1891, which we'll get back to, but in 1916 at the LMC's 25th anniversary. On March 20th, 1916, 105 years ago today, 125 members of the Ladies Musical Club gathered at the Hotel Sorrento on Seattle's First Hill. This was a momentous occasion. The LMC was celebrating its silver anniversary, and members reflected on 25 years of hard work building Seattle's musical community with toasts, speeches, performance, and a luncheon. In short, this anniversary luncheon in 1916 sounds very much like the LMC's annual luncheon that we would be attending today in person during normal times as one of our main yearly events. I came across this silver anniversary celebration while researching my book on the LMC's history, due out later this year. When imagining this event, I was struck by how familiar it felt, by how similar it was to our continued tradition of our springtime luncheon, as I mentioned. One review describes how, quote, tables and rooms were profusely decorated with flowers in the club colors of yellow and white, end quote. Members sat at linen tables of 5 and chatted and laughed between lunch, speeches by past presidents, toasts, and musical performances. And as we look closely at the LMC's work in the first 25 years that was recounted in these speeches, we see the origins for all of our current flagship programs. Though it has been over 100 years since the club turned 25 and 13 decades since it was founded in 1891, the LMC's early history isn't quite as distant as it may seem. But how do we even begin to talk about a history so vast and varied? I've been considering this while both preparing for this event and compiling the LMC's comprehensive history for the book. When reflecting on so vast a history, as we do in part today, we look back in awe at what these women were able to start and accomplish, focusing on emblematic milestones like the LMC's founding and important concerts and anniversaries that certainly help define how we remember the LMC. These things are important to revisit, for they remind us how much the work we do matters and will continue to matter, and how much music matters. And they tell us new things about the past that even this historian, who has been immersed in the LMC's history for nearly a decade now, can learn from. They also show us how, in 25 or 100 years from now, LMC members may gather for some distant future anniversary luncheon and reflect fondly on today's virtual gathering. However, it is also important to remember that though historical milestones shine like streetlights along a road darkened by time and distance, the dark spots in between also matter, where these women worked quietly, chaotically, sometimes mundanely, and always purposefully, aiming to cultivate Seattle's broader musical community while focusing on the tasks and minutiae of both club work and everyday life. We also honor that work today, of our forebears and of our own, in addition to the club's glamorous highlights. Echoing the 1916 Silver Anniversary program, today we will explore work from the LMC's first quarter century that LMC members were toasting in 1916, including its founding in 1891, and early programs like the Artist Concert Series, which brought famous artists to Seattle, scholarships for young musicians, support of community partner institutions, and complimentary public concerts by members that serve as the roadmap for our current work today. We will watch LMC members perform piano pieces that were played by charter members at the 1916 luncheon. We will hear past president and 50-year member Dorene Kenkman talk about the LMC's partnership with Seattle's Museum of History and Industry, or MOHAI, which stewards much of the LMC's extensive historical archives. This community partnership was established in 1981 and solidified as the LMC approached its 1991 centennial. Yet, as we will see, the earlier genesis of this partnership shows us that we are, first and foremost, all members of a shared community whose lives overlap in meaningful and sometimes serendipitous ways. Dorene also offers some wisdom on how to ensure the LMC endures for the next 130 years, much like past presidents offered at the 1916 event. And finally, we will toast to the LMC's 130th anniversary, just as toasts were offered at the LMC's Silver. In 1916, against the backdrop of a world war abroad and violent labor unrest at home, the ladies knew it was important to come together at that moment, as we do today, to celebrate in similarly uneasy times. May these anniversary events and luncheons continue to serve as welcomed and familiar refrains as we move toward our next milestone. 130 years of continuous and successful operation is no small feat for any organization. To place it in historical context, the LMC was founded in March of 1891, just 2 years after Washington became a state in 1889, and 2 years after Seattle's Great Fire decimated much of Seattle's downtown. The LMC predates other familiar long-standing Seattle institutions, such as the Seattle Symphony, founded in 1903, Seattle Children's, founded in 1908, and Seattle's Cornish College of the Arts, founded in 1914. In fact, the LMC not only predates these institutions by several years or sometimes even decades, but the club also played a crucial role in founding and maintaining each and every one of these organizations in their early years. For instance, the Cornish School, as it was called in its early days, is named for its founder, Nellie Cornish, a longtime LMC member. And the LMC provided financial support during its first decade. It did the same for the Seattle Symphony, holding a benefit concert in 1905 for the fledgling organization and providing yearly donations throughout the 19-teens. Given the LMC's contributions to building Seattle's cultural community, it is safe to say that the LMC's history is inextricably intertwined with the history of Seattle itself. In fact, the LMC's Silver was described in Seattle's weekly arts magazine, The Town Crier, as, quote, the most important event of the week and one of the most important in the history of the musical life of Seattle. A Seattle Post-Intelligencer preview reported the similarly singular importance of the LMC, writing, quote, Seattle has become a proper mecca for the pilgrimage of some of the greatest artists, and it hasn't been, as might be idly supposed, simply in line with Seattle's growth as an industrial and commercial city. There are cities whose chambers of commerce and boards of trade have advertised them until their populations have grown in a few years. Yet artistically, these cities have stood still. Had it not been for the Ladies' Musical Club, Seattle might have been just such a city. In this month, at about this date, a band of women organized the club. They were musicians, singers or instrumentalists, these women, and they thought that by organizing, educational features would be possible. Its members did not dream it was destined to be the controlling musical factor of the Northwest. Looking back to the LMC's founding, we imagine Seattle in 1891 to be a wild and woolly place, and we wouldn't be wrong. When the LMC was founded, Washington State had around 350,000 residents, and the city of Seattle had just shy of 43,000 people. Washington women made up just 38% of the population, and early industries included logging, fishing, agriculture, and mining. In other words, Seattle women were used to doing and being surrounded by hard work. Seattle was a rough and tumble town, to be sure, yet when the LMC was founded, Seattle's musical community was already blossoming. Many of the LMC's founders had formed musical organizations before founding the LMC, like the short-lived Seattle Musical Society in 1884 and the Oratorio Society in 1885, founded by 3 of the LMC's charter members. What this means is that when the LMC was established in 1891 by some of these musical women, the founders already had experience starting and running a music club. They had seen what worked and what didn't in a local musical organization, and were seeking outlets for their own considerable musical talents. These factors set the stage for the LMC's success. It was, quote, formed for the purpose of developing the musical talent of its members and stimulating musical interest in Seattle, end quote. Seattle musicians and audiences were ready. To say that the LMC hit the ground running would be an understatement. Before the LMC's first meeting on Monday, March 2nd, 1891, at the home of Mrs. George W. Bacon, the club's constitution and bylaws had already been drafted, and several pieces of music had been rehearsed for performance that day. The task of the 20 members present, therefore, was to elect leaders by vote to fill the club's roles that were already drafted, to pay membership dues, and to go through the pre-drafted constitution article by article and adopt each as they did unanimously. Membership categories included active and associate members. Active members would consist exclusively of ladies, and the associate members would be made up of both ladies and gentlemen. The LMC's subsequent concert schedule, or musicales as they were called, was set for every other Friday afternoon at 2:30. Charter member Mrs. Beatrice Cheel-Fiskin recounted this first meeting at the silver anniversary in her speech about bygone days. She said that, quote, never shall I forget that bright, blustery day in March when a few of us walked over to the corner house on 8th Avenue and James Street and climbed the steps to be welcomed by Mrs. George W. Bacon in a silken gown with many ruffles and bearing in her hand the usual fan. And after knocking down a piece or two of priceless bric-a-brac and putting vandal feet through china cabinets that loomed in unexpected corners, we sat down to enjoy the first program of the Ladies' Musical Club. A girl from Philadelphia played a minuet, and Henrietta Hamilton whistled a waltz, and we all declared that she was the only human canary in existence, and we were proud that we had caged her. There the seed was sown, and the plant grew and waxed strong in spite of many a killing frost of a financial kind. In addition to her speech, Mrs. Beatrice Cheel-Fiskin also performed Stephen Heller's Rondino in G. She got the crowd laughing by announcing, as she sat to the piano to start, ladies, I have not seen the music of this piece for 30 years. This was, of course, not quite true, for she had played that piece at the LMC's first public concert only 25 years prior, on March 20th, 1891. This is the same piece that Valentina is performing on our program today that we will see shortly. Another newspaper article about the 1916 Silver notes that the LMC, quote, today is known throughout the country as the organization which had most to do with putting Seattle on the musical map. This national recognition was due in part to the LMC's performance at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which was deemed a triumph by newspapers back home. Mrs. G.A.C. Rochester even wore the same dress to the silver anniversary that she had performed in at the fair as a representative of Washington's musical women on the national stage. Another charter member, May Potvin Bates, performed a newer piece, Debussy's Dancers of Delphi. This juxtaposition of old and new music highlights the LMC's commitment to both the past and future of musical innovation. Another way the LMC supported music's future was by providing scholarships for young musicians, something the LMC continues today with its Francis Walton competition and tour. In 1905, the LMC announced it would be offering a 3-year tuition scholarship for young musicians to study music in New York or in European conservatories. Offered to violinists, vocalists, and pianists, the scholarship program had 14 applicants the first year and marked the beginning of another of LMC's lasting legacies. By the LMC's silver anniversary, the club had spent approximately $4,500 on scholarships and gifts, which, according to the internet, is nearly $125,000 in today's currency. But where did this money come from? The LMC's Artist Concert Series, which began in 1900 and offered 4 to 6 concerts per season of internationally renowned musicians, generated enough revenue to support the LMC's other programs. It was started by Mrs. Rose Gottstein, who was the LMC's president from 1906 to 1908 and its impresario from 1900 until her sudden death in 1939. The popular concerts featured soloists like Lillian Nordica and large ensembles like Walter Damrosch and the New York Symphony Orchestra. And these generated huge earnings for the club that then funded its other programs, like the scholarships, as well as supporting local schools and other civic ventures, both precursors to our current Music in Schools program. The LMC's public concerts were also a point of praise at the silver anniversary. One preview notes proudly that, quote, without interruption in the last 25 years, the club has been giving monthly concerts which have at all times been open to the public. In addition, semi-monthly study meetings have been held. From an original membership of 25, the club has grown to an organization of 160 active members with an associate membership of 400 to 600. A chorus and student membership, also a part of the club's activities, is not included in these figures, end quote. These concerts by members continue today in our newest format this year, our virtual happy hour concerts that are free to the public as part of our public concert series. The events recounted at the LMC's silver anniversary give us an overview of the important work accomplished by the club in its first quarter century. They also highlight the long-standing traditions we still observe, like the luncheon, as well as revealing the roots of our current programs. Next, we will watch a performance of Debussy's Dancers of Delphi, followed by historical notes of our collaboration with MOHAI by past President Dorene Kenkman. This will be followed by another performance from the LMC's silver. And finally, I will offer a short toast that we can all raise a glass to in honor of coming together today and of the LMC's 130th anniversary. If you're interested in learning more about the LMC's history, I encourage you to visit the LMC's digital archives on our website and look for our history book later this year. Don't mind just telling us a little bit more about your personal connection to the McCurdy's and to MOHAI, and why MOHAI seemed a natural fit for the archives of the Ladies Musical Club, which you helped put together.
It's difficult to know exactly where to start because it's quite a broad spectrum to try and capsulize. However, I moved with my family into the Mount Baker district in the 4th grade. And as such, I attended John Muir grade school. And the Mount Baker area was a wonderful area for, I'd say, middle class, middle upper class families. And as such, by the time I got to in the 6th grade, 7th grade, so forth, why I was quite active in the programs. And I was invited to be in a play, and my part was, I played Mother Nature. And as you might imagine, with the name John Muir, of course, this John Muir School had a large interest and dedication to conservation. And there is a John Muir Grove that's up by Natchez Pass, past Enumclaw. And so the name John Muir really gets emphasized when you're going to John Muir School. So I started there in the 4th grade. And by the way, that's where I met my husband too. In the 4th grade. I don't even remember the first time I saw him. Anyway, I was invited to be in a play, and that was about conservation. And my part was Mother Nature. And another part was the spirit of youth. And that was played by a young man. I think I was in the 7th grade at the time, and he was in the 6th grade, and his name was Tom McCurdy. And as such, we became, friends. He also knew my husband. They later played football together and so forth and so on. So Tom was a nice young friend that we had through school. And that endured all the way through high school as well, because those of us who went to John Muir then went on to Franklin High School. And so Tom and I we'd see each other in the halls. He'd say, "Hi, Mother Nature," and I'd say, "Hi, Spirit of Youth," and so forth and so on. So that was how that started, and we were nice friends. Of course, graduated from high school. Much time went by. I got married. He was in the service and so forth. And one of the things that was very sad was that he passed away at a very early age, only 27, as I recall. But this was, the McCurdys had 2 sons. Jim was the elder, and Tom was the younger. And this was a very sad time for them and for everyone who knew Tom through school. He was a great guy. He was a real natural leader, very friendly, very outgoing, and very much cared about. So his passing was of some moment to everyone who had ever had anything to do with him all the way through school, my husband included. He was very saddened about Tom's passing away. Going into Ladies Musical Club, when I began to discover as president that we had just bushels of history, because we were getting close to being 100 years old by this time, that had never been organized. We had it just in a big basket, and there were pockets of information, but nothing that pinned one step to the next, to the next, to the next. So we were discussing changes as well as history. And at this point in time, I found out that our history was in a big bin at MOHAI. And a lady by the name of Leota Rawson, who had been, I believe, president before and was a natural historian. And she was really the one that was responsible for having the sensibilities to gather the information in one spot, but it had not been organized. So I went over to MOHAI and went through this. I can't remember if Iris went with me to begin with, but Iris was very interested, Iris Freebrock Ewing, who was president then just after I was. Helen Holsclaw, I think, followed me, and then Iris. And Iris was to be president at the 100th anniversary. So we were working our way toward that. And so Matt Krashen was the guy there at MOHAI that was handling the histories and so forth and so on. So we met with him. Iris and I took him to lunch a couple of times, and he offered to join us in writing a grant to get all this history memorialized in proper order. And so that was how the original tie came with MOHAI as far as the history was concerned. And when I went over to visit there at MOHAI, and it was then over by the Arboretum, as I walked in the door into the office, there was a large picture of Tom McCurdy. And he was gone, of course, by this time. And I was just shocked and pleasantly so. I remember it made me quite emotional at the time. And of course, then I put the tie in because Mr. McCurdy, Horace McCurdy, had been one of the initiators of the MOHAI idea, Museum of History and Industry. And he had almost all of the activities in Seattle represented there in their own category. So here was the his story, his story, the history of Seattle in one spot. And although I didn't meet Mr. McCurdy at the time, I had met them years and years ago, in school activities when the parents would be there and so forth. So I had seen him and I had met his mother and father, but that was years ago. And, but I felt quite a tie when I saw Tom's picture and remembered what he had meant to all of us as young people and what he had contributed to the neighborhood, to the community and so forth, even as a young person, as a McCurdy. And here was Mr. McCurdy now making the effort to have all of Seattle's history, memorialized in one spot. So that's what kind of grabbed me. And we had a number of meetings with Matt Krashen and began to work the information so that we could put together a grant, which we did. And then we received a grant. So MOHAI and Ladies Musical Club wrote a joint grant to organize our history and have it continued to be memorialized by MOHAI from that point on. And there's other stories that go with it that made me very happy that I had a part in that. Now, there's a story about my singing for Mr. McCurdy's birthday, but somewhere along the line, I was asked to sing for a birthday party in honor of Horace McCurdy. He had been a long-time Mason, and the Scottish Rites was a sort of a department, a special department of the Shriners. And someone had heard me sing, and as I recall, I don't recall who it was, but they asked me to sing a program, do a little program for this Scottish Rites celebration. And so I did. And my teacher, Mrs. Boardman, Ella Helm Boardman, suggested, because she knew the McCurdy name, I believe she'd met him as well years before, suggested that I sing a song called Mary of Argyle. And the McCurdy background is from Scotland. She said this was a Scottish song that was very dear to every Scot heart. And so I memorized the song. It's sort of like a silver threads among the gold. And after I sang it, Mr. McCurdy came up to me and he recognized that I had been in the neighborhood and sort of remembered, that I had known Tom, in which we talked about. And then he said to me, I want you to know, he said, that how much that song meant to him, because it was a song his father used to sing to his mother in Scotland. And so that was very meaningful to me. And we continued the association with MOHAI because of some of this background that had happened. So, it endeared everyone to the situation. And it was about that time also, and I don't recall the particulars because I wasn't president. But anyway, we were then having our board meetings and so forth at MOHAI. So we became more closely connected with MOHAI all the time. And all these little stories in the background certainly helped to marry the situation together and make us feel a great sense of loyalty to MOHAI and for them, for us as well. So I remember many, many wonderful moments, programs that we gave there, the different personalities, and the great willingness to be of help to us and we to them. So it's a situation that has just grown through these last years to something that we're just very proud of and very much a part of.
I had one more question that I wanted to ask you that we've talked about too. How do you see the LMC succeeding for the next 130 years?
Well, I think the basic plus, I guess that's a good word, in favor of our succeeding is that when we came toward our 100th anniversary, we realized that the world had changed and was continuing to change. And if we were going to last, if we were going to endure, we were going to have to change too. And I've got to say that Ladies Musical Club still today, even though we may praise and really have our older members and the ones who started the organization on a pedestal and thinking, could we ever be as great as they were to start something so wonderful? Ladies Musical Club is an organization of ideas, and they're constantly coming to the surface. And we began to really pay attention to that about the time we were 100 years old, with the fact that our budget was just not going to be able to hack these exorbitant, or what seemed to us, fees to have performers come for us. We were going to have to find some other means to be important to the community, as important as this, if not more important. And so out of this struggle, why people like Roberta Diesner and Fran Walton and so forth had wonderful ideas, and we began to explore those. And that's how Music in Schools started. And that's how the tour started as far as the scholarship was concerned. And these ladies did it with their own inimitable type energy, each in their own field. And that's what's going to make us continue, is to be aware of these changes and to see how we can fit, not to go back to the old days, which were wonderful. They're wonderful to talk about and wonderful to put into the archives. But time marches on, and so we just have to continue.
Before I give my closing toast, I'd like to say thank you to all the LMC's board members and committee chairs here today, and especially to our president, Kate Smith, who helped us successfully pivot during this pandemic. Thank you to those of you watching and supporting the LMC today and throughout the years. And thanks to all the members of the Ladies Musical Club then and now as we cheers to our 130 years. In March of 1916, the LMC celebrated its 25th anniversary with a musical luncheon at the Hotel Sorrento. Two pieces we heard today, in fact, were played by charter members May Potvin and Beatrice Cheel, who also told stories about the LMC's bygone days, much like we've done here today. Mrs. Rose Gottstein, the LMC's impresario, gave the closing talk about the LMC's achievements over the previous quarter century. She offered some prescient words that I would like to share today. In conclusion, Mrs. Gottstein said, quote, "I hope that this club will go on forever, holding to its ideals and adding year by year to its influence, that it may ever be a power for the musical good of this community. And when the 50th celebration of the Ladies Musical Club takes place, we who will not be there to celebrate it ask no better eulogy than that they who celebrate say of us, they builded well." Well, to Mrs. Gottstein, I say, here we sit 105 years later at not the 50th, but the 130th celebration of the Ladies Musical Club. And we raise a glass to you who came before and say, they builded well.
They builded well.
Thank you all for joining us today, and cheers to 130 years.
Cheers.
Cheers.
130 years.
Bravi tutti.
Yeah.